Okay, well, I'm a big-time Angels fan myself, and I know that there is one other baseball fan, I think an LA Dodgers fan in the back somewhere. The rest of you don't care about baseball. But you don't have to be a baseball fan to notice the attention that the media has given lately to this controversy over steroids in Major League Baseball. And if you're like me, you're watching this media and you're thinking that Major League Baseball is just going to explode because steroids are completely ruining the sport. But my main claim is that steroid use has a minimal effect on Major League Baseball. And the 3 points that I want to make to support that claim are, number 1, the actual effects of steroids is questionable. 2, when steroids were used widely, everyone knew it. So in effect, it had become part of the game. And number 3, the use of steroids by baseball players is over. And I want to use a functional definition of steroids. So when I say steroids, I just mean any chemical substance that is thought to enhance muscle growth and quicken injury recovery. So first of all, the actual effects of steroids is questionable. I checked out 4 books from my local library, and they were the only 4 books that my library had on steroids in direct relation to athletics. The first book was called Asterisk. It was written by David Ezra, published in 2008. And the author surveyed all the research on steroids, and he concluded that they are questionable as performance enhancers. And in fact, natural substances like protein or creatine can have the same effect in building muscle as these steroids do. The second book is called Anabolic Steroids in the Athlete, published in 2002, is written by William Taylor. And he actually references 8 scientific studies on the effects of steroids. And 3 of those studies showed that muscle strength actually increased with the taking of steroids when it was used in conjunction with strength training. But 2 of those 3 were not statistically significant. So only 1 of the 8 studies showed that there was actually a correlation between steroids and muscle growth. And the last 2 books, I just want to mention quickly. This isn't a joke name. This guy's name is Dick Pound. And in 2006, he published a book called Inside Dope: How Drugs Are the Biggest Threat to Sports, Why You Should Care, and What Can Be Done About Them. And also in 2006, Nathan Jendrick published a book called Dunks, Doubles, Doping: How Steroids Are Killing American Athletics. So you can tell by the title that those authors are pretty biased and they're attacking the use of steroids. But in both of those books, I looked through them. They have lots of stories and lots of testimonies, but they don't cite any research or any statistics about how steroids actually work. So I think it's safe to say that the actual effect of steroids is questionable. My second point, when steroids were used widely, everyone knew it. So in effect, steroid use had become a part of the sport. The Mitchell Report came out in 2007. That was a big deal. You may have heard about it. This guy, George Mitchell, did a 20-month investigation, and he found that steroid use was attributable to commissioners, club officials, players, and owners. So everybody in the MLB knew that these players were using steroids. So my point is that there have been a lot of changes in baseball from the times when Babe Ruth played until now. And steroids, I think, were just one of those changes. So when we think about the game during this time period, it's just going to be the time when players were using drugs. And my third point is that the use of steroids by baseball players is over. In 2005, Jose Canseco published a book called Juiced. You may have heard about that too. He went on TV and did a bunch of interviews about it. And he said that all the top players in baseball were using steroids. Well, his career lasted from 1986 to 1999. So what's happened since 1999? In 2003, Major League Baseball began a drug testing policy, and it's a very strict drug testing policy that administers harsh fines and suspensions to players who test positive to steroids. So just this Sunday, I came across a story in the New York Times by Michael Schmidt, and he wrote that there were only 3 positive drug tests in 2008. So that was just last season. This is the 2009 season that's starting right now. So since 2003, when the MLB cracked down on steroids, I think they're no longer an issue. So when you think of that, when you think about how much we know about steroids, and when you look at the actual effect of steroids and how questionable that is, it's safe to say that steroid use has a minimal effect on Major League Baseball.
All right, the proposition's very clearly stated. I like the attention device, the reference to our earlier survey about who was interested in baseball. You set up what the supporting points are going to be in the speech very clearly, and you've got some basic definitions there, okay. The labeling of the supporting points when you get into the speech, that's also very solid. All the organizational things, I don't think there's any problem with. The explanation about how steroid is just part of the game on that second point, and that it doesn't make a big impact, I'm not sure that that's as clear an explanation as it needs to be. I think you need to work on that a little bit more. You've got personal credibility because you're a fan and you sound like you've done quite a bit of research. You mentioned the books that you're looking at and you talk about it in a knowledgeable way. So I think that that enhances your credibility for the audience quite a bit. On the evidence, you are depending a lot on the summary evidence in the first two books that you're mentioning and the absence of information. The notion that steroids are not muscle building, I think, is perhaps a little problematic because you've limited yourself only to research or discussion of it in the sports context here, and there's a lot of medical information that talks about, I mean, let's face it, they prescribe steroids for people recovering from injuries and all that kind of stuff. So there's probably information about how it builds up. It just doesn't happen to be in these particular books, and so they're not necessarily exhaustive sources, and that's why you may need to look at some other information. But I thought you did a good job presenting the information that you had. Let's see. Oh, and I thought you had very good audience contact with the audience. You're talking to everybody in a level, even tone, but there's good inflection when you're speaking on the subject. Like I said, I think that it creates a good ethos and confidence level when we're listening to you. And you, again, like the organizational stuff that was earlier in the speech, you have a really solid summary of what your argument is, and you finish off with the thesis or the proposition that you've got that makes it very clear that you're done with the argument and what the point is that we're supposed to have gotten from that. So that part is solid. Thank you.